Commander Zex-9 had orchestrated the annihilation of 47 civilizations across 12 star systems. His fleet of crystalline warships had reduced entire planets to cosmic dust, their populations scattered like seeds in the void. Yet as he stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring down at the small blue world called Earth, something unprecedented was happening. His invasion force, 3,000 ships strong, hung motionless in the darkness of space, their weapons powered down, their crews confused and waiting. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The humans weren't fighting back. They weren't launching desperate counterattacks or broadcasting frantic surrender messages. Instead, according to his surveillance reports, they were having barbecues. The morning had started like any other conquest for Commander Zex-9. His elongated form, standing nearly 9 feet tall, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed amber in the artificial light of his command deck, moved with the precise efficiency of a predator. The Vorthak Empire had spent centuries perfecting the art of planetary subjugation, and Earth was supposed to be nothing more than another routine operation. Intelligence reports had painted the picture of a fractured world full of primitive beings who spent more time fighting each other than advancing their technology. Lieutenant Kora-3, his second-in-command, approached with the morning reconnaissance data displayed on a floating holographic tablet. Her smaller frame moved with nervous energy, and the bluish tint to her normally gray skin indicated stress levels that concerned Zex-9. In their species, emotional states were impossible to hide, written across their flesh like living mood rings. "Commander," she began, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her as academy-trained. "The surveillance drones have returned from the planetary surface. The data is unusual." Zex-9 turned his attention from the viewport where Earth hung like a jewel against the starfield. His amber eyes fixed on his lieutenant with the intensity that had made him legendary among the Vorthak military. 47 worlds had fallen before that gaze, their leaders crumbling under the weight of his presence. Yet Kora-3's distress seemed to stem from something beyond his intimidating demeanor. "Define unusual, Lieutenant," he commanded, his voice resonating through the bridge's crystalline walls. The sound carried an harmonic frequency that most species found deeply unsettling, a Sevalli trait that the Vorthak had weaponized over millennia of conquest. Kora-3 manipulated the holographic display, causing it to expand into a three-dimensional map of Earth's surface. Thousands of red dots appeared across the continents, each one representing a concentration of human activity that should have been military installations, government bunkers, or weapons facilities. Instead, the readings showed something that made no tactical sense whatsoever. "Sir, we detected massive gatherings across the planet's surface. Initially, we assumed these were military formations preparing for defense. However, closer analysis reveals that humans have congregated in parks, beaches, and residential areas. They appear to be cooking food outdoors and engaging in recreational activities." The silence that followed was broken only by the steady hum of the ship's crystalline power core. Zex-9's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. In 47 previous invasions, the pattern had been predictable. First came the frantic military mobilization, then desperate diplomatic overtures, followed by either futile resistance or immediate surrender. Never had a species responded to an invasion fleet by having outdoor meals. "Show me the surface feeds," Zex-9 ordered, his tone carrying a note of confusion that his crew had never heard before. The main display shimmered and transformed into a live feed from the planet below. What Zex-9 saw defied every tactical manual in the Vorthak military database. In a sprawling park in what intelligence had identified as Central America, thousands of humans had gathered with small cooking devices and portable shelters. Children ran between groups of adults who sat in circles, consuming food and engaging in what appeared to be ritualistic sharing of beverages. "Zoom in on Sector 7, Zex-9 commanded, his confusion growing. The image focused on a particular group that caught his attention. An elderly human female with silver hair sat at the center of a large gathering, surrounded by what appeared to be multiple generations of the same genetic line. Smaller humans climbed over larger ones in displays of affection that the Vorthak found bewildering. These creatures were showing physical vulnerability to each other, turning their backs, exposing their necks, engaging in behaviors that would be suicidal during an invasion. Are they aware of our presence? Zex-9 asked, though he knew the answer. His fleet had announced their arrival with the traditional electromagnetic pulse that disabled most planetary communication systems. The humans' primitive networks had gone dark exactly as expected. "Affirmative, Commander," replied Tactical Officer Dren 12 from his station near the rear of the bridge. "Our arrival pulse was detected by their military installations. We intercepted multiple emergency broadcasts before their communication grid collapsed. They know we're here." This information only deepened Zex-9's confusion. Species that knew they were facing extinction typically didn't respond by gathering in large, vulnerable groups to share meals. They either fought desperately or surrendered immediately. This strange middle ground was outside his experience entirely. Lieutenant KORA-3, bring up the psychological profiles our advanced scouts compiled on this species. The holographic display shifted to show detailed analysis of human behavior patterns. The Vorthak had spent months observing human society, documenting their social structures, military capabilities, and psychological weaknesses. According to the data, humans were a fragmented species prone to internal conflict, with moderate intelligence but primitive technology. They fought constantly among themselves over resources, territory, and ideological differences. The report suggested they would either unite quickly against an external threat or collapse into chaos as different factions blamed each other for the invasion. The profiles indicate standard pack behavior with hierarchical social structures, KORA-3 read from the display. Humans form small family units that occasionally cooperate but more often compete for resources. Under stress, they typically exhibit flight responses or aggressive territoriality. There's no precedent in our observations for this type of coordinated non-military gathering during a crisis. Zex-9 studied the data while monitoring the live feeds from the planet's surface. The humans below were not exhibiting any of the predicted behaviors. Instead of panic or military organization, they seemed to be engaged in some sort of planet-wide social ritual that prioritized proximity to family groups over strategic positioning. "What are those devices they're using to heat their food?" he asked, pointing to small metal contraptions that seemed to be producing controlled flames. "Our analysis indicates they're portable combustion devices used for outdoor cooking," Dren 12 reported. "Humans apparently transport these devices to outdoor locations to prepare meals away from their permanent dwellings. Intelligence suggests this is a recreational activity they call grilling or quote-quote barbecuing." The concept was so foreign to Vorthak, thinking that Zex-9 had to process it several times. His species consumed nutrient paste, optimized for efficiency and digestion. The idea of deliberately complicating food preparation by moving it to inconvenient locations and using primitive fire seemed counterproductive to the point of madness. "Sir," KORA-3 interrupted his thoughts, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet." Zex-9 straightened, finally anticipating something familiar. This would be the surrender offer, or the desperate diplomatic plea that always came once a species realized the hopelessness of their situation. "Put it through." The main display flickered and resolved into the image of a human male with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He wore casual clothing rather than a military uniform and seemed to be standing in what looked like a residential kitchen. Behind him, other humans moved around preparing food, apparently unaware that they were broadcasting to an alien invasion fleet. "Hello there," the human said with a casualness that struck the bridge crew silent. "I'm assuming you folks are the visitors everyone's been talking about. I'm Frank Martinez, and I guess I'm speaking for my family right now, though I should mention we're having our annual reunion this weekend, so things are a bit chaotic." Zex-9 exchanged glances with his officers. In 47 invasions, no species had ever opened communication by discussing family gatherings or describing their situation as, quote, chaotic, in such a conversational tone. "We're not really sure about protocol here," Frank continued, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he was addressing a massive military force capable of sterilizing his planet. "But we figured, since you came all this way, maybe you'd like to know what's going on down here. See, we only get together like this once a year. And some of my relatives haven't seen each other since the last reunion. My cousin Maria drove 18 hours from Seattle with her kids, and my brother David flew in from Texas yesterday." The human paused to accept what appeared to be a beverage from someone off-screen, taking a casual sip before continuing. Anyway, we were wondering if maybe you could give us the weekend to finish up here. I know that might sound weird, but Maria's making her famous potato salad, and honestly, it's been 3 years since we've all been in the same place at the same time. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. Zex-9 stared at the now blank display, trying to process what he had just witnessed. A member of a species facing invasion had just asked an alien warfleet to postpone their conquest because of potato salad. "Commander," Cora 3 said hesitantly, "should we interpret that as a surrender negotiation or a delay tactic?" Zex-9 didn't answer immediately. He had encountered surrender negotiations that involved offering tribute, promising cooperation, or providing intelligence about neighboring systems. He had seen delay tactics that involved fake diplomatic protocols, false technical difficulties, or desperate attempts to buy time for evacuation. Never had he encountered a species that asked for a weekend extension to finish a family meal. "Bring up the tactical analysis of their military capabilities," he ordered, wondering if perhaps the humans were concealing their true strength and this casual behavior was some sort of psychological warfare. The display shifted to show Earth's military infrastructure, and the data was as disappointing as their advanced intelligence had suggested. The humans possessed nuclear weapons, but their delivery systems were primitive, and their nuclear arsenal was fragmented among multiple competing nations. Their space technology was barely sufficient for local orbital operations. Their conventional military forces, while numerous, relied on projectile weapons and chemical explosives that would be ineffective against Vorthak shielding. "Sir, their military capacity is exactly as projected," Dren 12 reported. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us." Now back to the story. "They pose no significant threat to our operations. A single bombardment sequence would neutralize their defensive capabilities entirely." This made the humans' behavior even more puzzling. Species with limited military options typically tried to maximize their diplomatic leverage, not ask for social time to complete recreational activities. "Show me more surface feeds," Zex-9 commanded. "I want to understand what they're actually doing down there." The display divided into multiple windows, each showing different locations across the planet. What Zex-9 saw challenged every assumption he had made about human behavior. In what appeared to be Australia, an extended family had set up an elaborate outdoor cooking operation near a beach, with multiple generations working together to prepare various dishes. Children played games while adults supervised cooking devices and arranged seating areas. In North America, similar scenes played out across thousands of locations. Humans had gathered in groups ranging from a few dozen to several hundred, all engaged in the same bizarre ritual of outdoor food preparation and family interaction. Most striking was the complete absence of defensive preparations. These gatherings were taking place in open areas with no protection from aerial attack, no escape routes, and no military presence. "Focus on the group in Sector 12, Zex-9 said, indicating a particularly large gathering in what intelligence identified as the Midwestern United States. The image zoomed in on a sprawling park where nearly 200 humans had assembled. What caught Zex-9's attention was the organization of the event. Despite the casual nature of the gathering, there was a clear structure to the activities. Different family units had established cooking stations around the perimeter, while the center of the area had been set up with tables and seating arrangements. Multiple generations interacted freely, with older humans directing activities while younger ones handled physical tasks. "Look at their coordination," Cora 3 observed. "They're demonstrating sophisticated logistical planning and resource allocation. This level of organization suggests significant social complexity." Zex-9 nodded, studying the patterns of interaction. The humans moved with purpose and efficiency, but it was efficiency applied to food preparation and social interaction rather than military readiness. They had organized supply chains, communication networks, and hierarchical command structures, but all focused on the successful execution of a shared meal. "Sir," Dren 12 interrupted, "we're detecting similar organizational patterns across the planet. Humans have mobilized resources and personnel on a scale comparable to military operations, but exclusively for these family gathering events." The implications of this observation struck Zex-9 immediately. Humanity had just demonstrated the ability to coordinate global-scale logistics under crisis conditions. When faced with an existential threat, they had successfully organized and deployed resources across their entire planet. However, instead of applying this coordination to defense or escape, they had used it to gather their families together. How many of these events are currently taking place? Zex-9 asked. Preliminary counts indicate approximately 12,000 major gatherings involving groups of 50 or more humans, Cora 3 reported. Additionally, there are hundreds of thousands of smaller family groups engaged in similar activities. We estimate that roughly 60% of the human population is currently participating in some form of outdoor family meal preparation. Zex-9 absorbed this information while watching the feeds from the planet below. 60% of humanity had responded to an alien invasion by having a barbecue with their relatives. This was either the most elaborate psychological warfare campaign he had ever encountered, or evidence of a completely different type of species psychology than anything in Vorthak military databases. Lieutenant, bring up the communication logs from our previous invasions. I want to compare the initial contact responses. The holographic display shifted to show archived communications from their recent conquests. The pattern was consistent across all 47 previous invasions. First contact typically involved frantic military chatter, followed by attempts to establish diplomatic communication through official government channels. Initial messages usually demanded to know the invader's intentions, offered immediate surrender terms, or attempted to establish protected status for non-combatants. Play the initial contact from the Zilithian invasion. Zex-9 ordered. The speakers crackled to life with a recording from their most recent conquest 6 months earlier. The Zilithian response had been typical. Urgent military transmissions attempting to coordinate planetary defense, followed by official government communications requesting dialogue and offering tribute. The tone had been formal, desperate, and focused entirely on species survival. The contrast with Frank Martinez's casual request for a weekend extension to finish making potato salad could not have been more stark. Sir, Cora 3 said hesitantly, should we proceed with standard bombardment protocols? Their military infrastructure remains vulnerable, and their population concentrations would maximize casualty efficiency. Zex-9 considered the question while studying the surface feeds. Standard protocol dictated immediate neutralization of defensive capabilities followed by systematic population reduction until surrender was achieved. The Vorthak Empire had refined these techniques over centuries of expansion, and deviation from established procedures was strongly discouraged by high command. However, something about the human response was triggering an unfamiliar sensation in Zex-9's analytical processes. The complete mismatch between their behavior and predicted outcomes suggested either that Vorthak intelligence was fundamentally flawed, or that humans represented a previously unknown type of species psychology. Either possibility warranted further investigation before proceeding with standard protocols. Maintain position, he ordered. I want comprehensive analysis of their behavioral patterns before we proceed. Something about this situation doesn't match our projections. Commander, Dren 12 called out from his station, we're receiving another transmission from the planet. Put it through. The display showed a different human this time. A woman with dark hair who appeared to be standing in front of a large outdoor cooking setup. Behind her, dozens of humans moved around what looked like a small village of temporary structures and cooking stations. High up there, she said, waving at the camera with a level of familiarity that suggested she was greeting neighbors rather than addressing an invasion fleet. I'm Sarah Chen, and I'm helping coordinate things here at our family reunion. We got Frank's message to you folks, and we wanted to add a few details. Sarah turned slightly to gesture at the activity behind her. See, this isn't just any family gathering. This is our first reunion since my grandmother passed away last year, and some of us have traveled from different continents to be here. My cousin James came all the way from Kenya, and my Aunt Linda made it in from Australia despite her fear of flying. She paused to accept what appeared to be a small human child who had run up to her, lifting the child casually while continuing to speak. We understand you probably have important business to conduct, but this is really significant for us. Grandma Rose was the one who always organized these reunions, and this is our first attempt to carry on her tradition. We've been planning this for 8 months, and honestly, we're not sure if we'll be able to pull it off again next year with everyone's schedules. The child in her arms said something inaudible, and Sarah smiled before responding to the camera again. My nephew here wants to know if you've ever had barbecued corn on the cob. He's very proud that he helped husk the corn this morning, and he thinks you might enjoy it if you'd like to try some." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew staring at a blank display once again. Zex-9 found himself experiencing a cognitive disconnect that he had never encountered in his military career. The humans were not only asking for time to complete their family gathering, but they were now offering to share their food with the invasion fleet. Analysis. Zex-9 said simply, "Sir," Cora 3 began, consulting her data streams, "this appears to be genuine. Cross-referencing the humans' cultural databases, family reunions are indeed significant social events in their society. The behavioral patterns we're observing are consistent with their documented social rituals rather than military or diplomatic strategies. You're suggesting that their response to our invasion is to continue with a scheduled social event?" Zex-9 asked, still struggling to process the concept. "That appears to be correct, Commander. Furthermore, the offer to share food is consistent with human hospitality traditions. In their culture, offering food to visitors is considered a gesture of welcome and respect." Zex-9 turned his attention back to the surface feeds, watching the humans continue their elaborate outdoor cooking operations. The organizational efficiency was undeniable, but it was being applied to completely non-military objectives. Children played games while adults managed complex cooking operations involving multiple heat sources and ingredient coordination. Multi-generational groups worked together with a level of cooperation that spoke to sophisticated social planning capabilities. "Sir," Dren 12 reported, "long-range sensors are detecting similar reunion events across their entire solar system. Humans living in orbital stations and lunar colonies have also organized family gatherings. It appears this social ritual has been coordinated on a system-wide scale." The scope of the coordination was becoming more impressive by the hour. Humanity had managed to organize simultaneous social events across multiple planets and space installations, while under the threat of invasion. The logistics alone represented a level of species-wide cooperation that surpassed many civilizations' military coordination capabilities. "How are they maintaining coordination without their communication networks?" Zex-9 asked. "It appears they established backup communication protocols specifically for these family events," Cora 3 replied. "They're using primitive radio frequencies and physical message systems to ensure the reunions proceed as planned despite our electromagnetic interference." Zex-9 felt his understanding of the situation shift fundamentally. The humans had not only prioritized their family gatherings over defensive preparations, but they had implemented redundant systems to ensure those gatherings could continue even under invasion conditions. This suggested a level of strategic thinking that was being applied to social objectives rather than military ones. "Commander," Core 3 said carefully, "I'm detecting increased stress indicators in the crew. This situation is outside established protocols, and the men are becoming confused about appropriate responses." Zex-9 looked around his bridge and confirmed his lieutenant's assessment. The bridge crew, trained in the efficient execution of planetary conquest, was struggling with a situation that didn't match their understanding of how intelligent species should behave under threat. Several officers were displaying the greenish skin tinge that indicated cognitive stress in Vorthak physiology. "Address the crew," Zex-9 ordered. "All stations report." One by one, his department heads provided status updates that reflected the unusual nature of their situation. Weapons systems reported ready status but questioned target priorities when the population was distributed in vulnerable gatherings rather than defensive positions. Intelligence reported successful surveillance but noted that the data collected didn't match predictive models for species behavior under invasion threat. Engineering reported all systems functioning normally but expressed confusion about the mission timeline given the lack of defensive response from the planet. "Sir," his chief science officer YLEX-7 spoke from his station near the bridge's analytical center. "I request permission to conduct deeper behavioral analysis. This species is exhibiting characteristics that don't match any of our existing xenopsychological models." Zex-9 considered the request. YLEX-7 was the fleet's leading expert on alien psychology, with experience in analyzing species behavior across dozens of worlds. If anyone could make sense of the human response, it would be him. "Granted." I want comprehensive analysis of their behavioral patterns, social organization, and psychological motivations. Focus particularly on their decision-making process under crisis conditions. Affirmative, Commander. I'll need access to extended surface observation and possibly direct communication with human subjects. The idea of direct communication with invasion targets was highly irregular. But Zex-9 was beginning to accept that this entire situation was highly irregular. Standard protocols assumed rational species behavior based on survival instincts. The humans appeared to be operating under a completely different set of priorities. Proceed with observation. Communication authorization will depend on your preliminary findings. As YLEX-7 began his analysis, Zex-9 returned his attention to the surface feeds. What he saw continued to challenge his understanding of intelligent species behavior. The humans had not only maintained their family gatherings despite the invasion threat, but they appeared to be enjoying themselves. Laughter and social interaction were clearly visible in the surveillance feeds, along with elaborate food preparation and sharing rituals. Sir, Cora 3 reported, we're receiving another transmission from the planet. How many humans are going to contact us? Zex-9 asked, though he was beginning to find their communications more intriguing than annoying. This one appears to be from a different family group, Cora 3 replied. Should I put it through? Yes. The display showed an elderly human male with weathered features and calloused hands who appeared to be standing near what looked like a large outdoor cooking apparatus. Behind him, multiple generations of humans worked together to prepare what seemed to be an enormous quantity of food. Afternoon, the man said with a nod toward the camera. I'm Bill Thompson, and I'm speaking for the Thompson family reunion here in Oklahoma. We heard about Frank and Sarah reaching out to you folks, and we wanted to add our voices to theirs. Bill gestured toward the activity behind him, where humans ranging from small children to elderly adults were engaged in various food preparation tasks. See, we don't get together very often because we're spread out across 3 countries now. My daughter lives in Canada, my son moved to Mexico for work, and my grandkids are scattered from coast to coast. This reunion has been in the planning stages for 2 years. He paused to help lift what appeared to be a large metal container, demonstrating physical strength that surprised Zex-9. Now, we understand you probably have important business to conduct, but we were hoping you might consider the human perspective on timing. These reunions aren't just social events for us. They're how we maintain connection across generations, how we pass down family history, and how we strengthen the bonds that hold our communities together. Another human, a woman who appeared to be related based on similar facial features, joined Bill in front of the camera. I'm his daughter Janet, she said. I drove 14 hours to get here because this might be the last time my father's generation can organize something like this. These gatherings are how we remember who we are as a family, and how we prepare the next generation to carry on our traditions. The transmission continued for several more minutes, with different family members explaining the significance of their reunion and the extensive planning that had gone into organizing it. What struck Zex-9 was the complexity of their social organization and the importance they placed on maintaining family connections across vast distances and time periods. When the transmission ended, Zex-9 found himself contemplating questions that had never occurred to him during previous invasions. The humans were not simply asking for more time. They were explaining the cultural and social significance of their activities. They seemed to believe that understanding their perspective might influence the invasion timeline. YLEX-7. Report your preliminary findings. The science officer manipulated his holographic displays to show behavioral analysis charts and social organization diagrams. Commander, initial analysis suggests that humans operate under a fundamentally different psychological model than any species we've previously encountered. Their response to existential threat is not individual survival behavior, but rather collective social reinforcement. Explain. When faced with potential extinction, most species either fight, flee, or attempt to negotiate for survival. Humans appear to be doing something entirely different. They're using the crisis as a catalyst for strengthening social bonds and affirming cultural identity. Instead of preparing for death or fighting for survival, they're celebrating life and family connections. Zex-9 studied the data displays showing human activity patterns across the planet. The analysis confirmed what he was observing. Humans were not responding to the invasion with fear or aggression, but with an intensification of their social bonding behaviors. Are you suggesting this is a deliberate psychological strategy? Zex-9 asked. Negative, Commander. All indicators suggest this is genuine behavior consistent with their normal social patterns, but amplified by the crisis conditions. They appear to have collectively decided that if this might be their last opportunity for family connection, they want to make it meaningful. The implications of this analysis settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. The humans were not trying to outsmart the invasion or buy time for escape. They were simply prioritizing what they considered most important in their potentially final hours: being together with their families. Sir, Cora 3 interrupted, we have a priority communication from the planet. This one appears to be from a coordinating group, rather than a single family. Put it through. The display showed a group of humans standing together in what appeared to be a large outdoor venue with thousands of people visible in the background. A woman with graying hair and a warm smile stepped forward to address the camera. Hello, she said with the same casual tone that characterized all human communications. I'm Dr. Patricia Williams, and I'm here with representatives from reunion coordinators across the globe. We wanted to reach out to you directly to explain what's happening down here. She gestured to the massive gathering behind her, where thousands of humans were engaged in various activities centered around food preparation and social interaction. What you're seeing isn't just individual family reunions. Over the past few hours, families have been combining their events and sharing resources. We're creating something that's never happened before in human history, a planet-wide family reunion. Another human, a man with kind eyes and weathered hands, joined her at the front. I'm Robert Kim, and I coordinate veteran family reunions. When we heard about the situation, our first instinct was to bring everyone together. In our experience, families are strongest when they're united, especially during difficult times. Dr. Williams nodded and continued. We know this might seem strange to you, but family is fundamental to human identity. We define ourselves through our connections to each other across generations. These reunions aren't just social events. They're how we remember our history, share our values, and prepare for the future. A third human, a younger woman with bright eyes and confident posture, stepped forward. I'm Maria Santos, and I work in event planning. What we've accomplished today represents the largest coordinated social event in human history. Families that have never met are sharing resources and stories. Children are learning about relatives they never knew existed. Grandparents are passing down traditions that might have been lost. The group paused as someone off-camera appeared to provide them with information. Dr. Williams smiled and turned back to the camera. We've just received word that similar coordination is happening on our lunar colonies and space stations. Humans throughout our solar system are participating in this unified family reunion. We wanted you to understand, Robert Kim added, that what you're witnessing represents humanity at our best. When faced with uncertainty, we don't just think about individual survival. We think about preserving what makes us human. Our connections to each other, our shared stories, and our hope for future generations. The transmission ended, leaving Zex-9 and his crew in contemplative silence. The humans had just described their planet-wide response to invasion as an expression of their highest values and most fundamental identity. They were not asking for mercy or attempting negotiation. They were explaining who they were as a species. Analysis? Zex-9 requested. Sir, YLEX-7 responded immediately. This changes everything. We're not dealing with a militarily primitive species exhibiting irrational behavior. We're dealing with a species that has fundamentally different priorities and values than anything in our database. Their response to existential threat is to reinforce the social structures and cultural practices that define their identity. Implications for conquest strategy? YLEX-7 hesitated before responding. Commander, traditional conquest assumes that species will prioritize survival over cultural preservation. Humans appear to prioritize cultural preservation over individual survival. Standard psychological warfare and intimidation tactics would be ineffective against a species that views maintaining their social bonds as more important than living. Zex-9 felt the familiar sensation of his worldview shifting under the weight of new information. In 47 previous conquests, the pattern had been predictable. Demonstrate overwhelming force, demand surrender, accept submission, or proceed with systematic destruction until submission was achieved. The humans were presenting a completely different paradigm. "Sir," Dren 12 called out from his tactical station, "long-range sensors are detecting something unusual. Human spacecraft are launching from various orbital installations." ZEX-9's attention snapped to immediate tactical concerns. "Military vessels?" "Negative, Commander. The ships appear to be civilian transport vessels, but they're not fleeing the system. They're converging on Earth's orbital space and requesting permission to land at various reunion sites." The tactical display showed dozens of small spacecraft moving toward Earth from lunar colonies, asteroid mining operations, and orbital research stations. Instead of evacuating or seeking refuge, humans living throughout the solar system were traveling to Earth to participate in the family reunions. "They're coming home," Cora 3 observed with wonder in her voice. "Instead of fleeing to safety, they're traveling toward the invasion zone to be with their families." ZEX-9 studied the flight patterns of the incoming vessels. There was no military formation, no defensive coordination, no strategic positioning. They were simply traveling toward family reunion sites with the urgency of people who had suddenly realized what was most important to them. "Commander," YLEX-7 reported, "this behavior is unprecedented in our xenopsychological databases. We have never encountered a species that responds to invasion by consolidating their population voluntarily. Most species either evacuate non-combatants or disperse their population to minimize casualties. Yet the humans are doing the opposite," ZEX-9 observed. "They're concentrating their population in vulnerable locations and prioritizing social connection over tactical advantage." The more he learned about human behavior, the more ZEX-9 realized that traditional conquest strategies might not apply to this species. How do you intimidate a species that prioritizes family connection over individual survival? How do you demoralize people who respond to threat by celebrating what they value most? "Sir," Cora 3 said quietly, "what are your orders?" ZEX-9 looked around his bridge at officers trained in the efficient prosecution of interstellar warfare. Then, back at the displays showing humans across the planet engaged in the largest family reunion in their species' history. 47 worlds had fallen to his fleet, using tactics designed for species that prioritized survival above all else. For the first time in his military career, he was facing a species that appeared to prioritize something else entirely. "Maintain position," he ordered. "Continue analysis. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we proceed." As his crew returned to their stations, ZEX-9 found himself staring down at the small blue world where an entire species had responded to invasion by having a barbecue with their relatives. In the growing dusk of the ship's night cycle, Earth's surface twinkled with thousands of cooking fires and gathering points, looking less like a planet under siege and more like a world celebrating its own existence. The most unsettling part was beginning to suspect that maybe, just maybe, the humans understood something about facing the unknown that the Vorthak Empire had never learned in centuries of conquest. As he watched families share meals under the shadow of an invasion fleet, ZEX-9 began to wonder if there might be forms of strength that had nothing to do with weapons or military might. For the first time in 47 invasions, he was genuinely curious about what would happen next. The breakthrough came at dawn on the second day, when 12-year-old Emma Rodriguez made a decision that would reshape interstellar relations forever. Emma had been helping her grandmother prepare breakfast for their extended family when she noticed the massive ships hanging in the sky like dark clouds. Unlike the adults who seemed focused on cooking and storytelling, Emma couldn't stop staring upward. She had always been the curious one in her family, the child who asked too many questions and never accepted simple answers. While her relatives debated whether to add more seasoning to the scrambled eggs, Emma grabbed her father's tablet and began typing. Her message was simple, direct, and utterly fearless in the way that only children can be. "Hi, space people. I'm Emma, and I'm 12. My abuela says you probably don't understand why we're having a big party when you came to visit. She thinks maybe you don't have families like we do. Do you want to come down and eat with us? My uncle makes really good pancakes." She hit send before anyone could stop her. Commander ZEX-9 was reviewing overnight surveillance reports when the transmission arrived. After hours of formal communications from adult humans explaining cultural significance and societal values, this simple message from a child struck him with unexpected force. The directness, the absence of fear, the casual invitation to share food. It represented everything about human behavior that his military training couldn't explain. "Sir," Cora 3 announced, "we're detecting movement at the reunion sites." The humans appear to be preparing something. The main display showed activity across thousands of gathering points. Humans were working together to construct what appeared to be additional seating areas and cooking stations. The scale of coordination was remarkable, but what caught Zex-9's attention was the purpose behind the activity. "They're expanding their gatherings," he observed. "Adding capacity for additional participants." "Confirmed, Commander." Analysis suggests they're preparing to accommodate approximately 3,000 additional individuals at sites across the planet. 3,000, the exact size of his invasion fleet. YLEX-7, are you detecting any military significance to these preparations? The science officer consulted his displays before responding. "Negative, sir. These appear to be genuine hospitality preparations. They're creating seating, expanding cooking operations, and organizing welcome committees. All activities are consistent with their cultural patterns for incorporating new members into family gatherings." Zex-9 felt something shift in his understanding of the situation. The humans weren't just continuing their reunions despite the invasion. They were actively preparing to include the invaders in their celebrations. The concept was so foreign to Vorthak military thinking that he struggled to process it. "Sir," Dren 12 called out urgently, "we have multiple incoming transmissions from the planet. It appears to be a coordinated communication effort. Put them through simultaneously." The main display divided into dozens of windows, each showing different human families at their reunion sites. What followed was unlike anything in the history of interstellar warfare. Instead of surrender terms or defensive threats, Zex-9 found himself listening to invitations. "We've got fresh corn on the cob and my wife's famous apple pie," said an elderly man from what appeared to be a farm setting. "Y'all are welcome to join us if you're interested." "My grandmother's been cooking all morning," added a young woman holding a small child. "She insists there's always room for more at her table." "We've got games set up for the kids and music planned for tonight," contributed another family spokesperson. "Seems like a shame to waste good weather and good company." One by one, families across the planet extended genuine invitations for the alien fleet to join their reunions. There were no conditions, no negotiations, no attempts at diplomatic leverage, just simple direct invitations to share food and company. The transmissions concluded with Emma Rodriguez appearing on screen again, this time accompanied by her grandmother, a weathered woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. "Mija told me she invited you for pancakes," the grandmother said with a warm smile. "I'm Rosa, and I want you to know that invitation is serious. In our family, when we invite someone to eat, we mean it. There's always enough food, and always room for one more chair at the table." Emma nodded enthusiastically beside her grandmother. "Abuela makes the best food ever, and she always says cooking for family is the most important thing you can do. If you're here visiting our planet, that makes you our guests, and guests become family when they share our food." The transmission ended, leaving Zex-9's bridge in absolute silence. His tactical officers, trained in the psychology of conquest, stared at displays showing weapons systems that had become irrelevant. His intelligence specialists looked at data that no longer made sense. His communication team monitored frequencies filled with recipes and family stories rather than military coordination. "Commander," YLEX-7 said quietly, "I believe we need to reconsider our fundamental assumptions about this species." "Explain." "Sir, we've been operating under the presumption that humans are a militarily inferior species exhibiting irrational behavior under threat. I now believe we're dealing with a species that has developed a completely different approach to conflict resolution. They're not being irrational, they're being strategically empathetic." Zex-9 turned his full attention to his science officer. Strategic empathy? Instead of responding to potential enemies with aggression or submission, they respond with inclusion. They're attempting to transform the relationship from invasion to visitation, from conquest to cultural exchange. It's not a military strategy, but it may be more effective than military resistance. The analysis crystallized something that had been building in Zex-9's mind since the humans first asked for a weekend extension to finish their potato salad. These creatures had found a way to weaponize hospitality, to turn kindness into a form of resistance that his military couldn't counter with traditional tactics. Sir, Core 3 interrupted. We're receiving a priority transmission from the planet. This one appears to be from their governmental leadership. Finally, Zex-9 muttered, expecting at last to hear something resembling conventional diplomatic contact. The display showed a middle-aged human woman in formal attire, standing in what appeared to be an official government building. Behind her, other formally dressed humans worked at various tasks, but even in this official setting, Zex-9 could see evidence of food preparation and family photos. "Greetings," the woman said with the same calm demeanor that characterized all human communications. "I'm President Sarah Mitchell, and I'm speaking on behalf of the United Earth government. We understand that our response to your arrival may seem unconventional from a military perspective." Finally, Zex-9 thought, someone who understands the situation in military terms. However, President Mitchell continued, "I want to explain our reasoning. When faced with a force we cannot resist through conventional means, we chose to respond with our greatest strength, our ability to form connections and build community. We're not surrendering, and we're not fighting. We're inviting you to discover what it means to be human." She paused to accept what appeared to be a cup of coffee from an aide, taking a casual sip before continuing. "Our families have extended genuine invitations for your people to join our reunions. These aren't diplomatic gestures or negotiation tactics. They're authentic expressions of human values. We believe that once you understand what family means to us, you'll understand what makes humanity worth preserving." The president gestured toward someone off camera, and Emma Rodriguez appeared beside her, still radiating the fearless curiosity that had started this unprecedented chain of events. "Emma here represents our future," President Mitchell said with genuine affection. "She didn't invite you to join us because she was told to by adults, or because she understood the political implications. She invited you because that's what humans do when visitors arrive. We share what we have and welcome others into our community." Emma looked directly into the camera with the unshakable confidence of youth. "Plus, you've been up in space for a really long time. And space food probably isn't very good. My abuela's pancakes are way better than anything you can make in those ships." The transmission ended with President Mitchell smiling at Emma's practical assessment of interstellar cuisine. "Commander," YLEX-7 said after a moment of silence, "I'm detecting physiological changes in our crew. Extended exposure to human behavior patterns is affecting our stress indicators and cognitive processing." Zex-9 looked around his bridge and confirmed the science officer's assessment. His crew, trained in the efficient prosecution of interstellar warfare, was displaying signs of psychological confusion. More concerning was his own response to the human communications. Instead of feeling frustrated by their refusal to engage in conventional conquest scenarios, he was finding himself genuinely curious about their pancakes. "Explain the physiological changes, sir." "Prolonged observation of human family behavior is triggering empathy responses in our neural chemistry. The crew is beginning to identify emotionally with the humans rather than viewing them as conquest targets. In simple terms, we're starting to like them." This was dangerous territory for any military force. Emotional attachment to conquest targets compromised operational effectiveness and violated fundamental Vorthak military doctrine. Yet Zex-9 found himself reluctant to order the standard psychological conditioning that would restore proper tactical detachment. "Sir," Dren 12 called out from his station, "long-range sensors are detecting incoming vessels at the edge of the system. Configuration suggests Vorthak Empire reinforcements." Zex-9's attention snapped to immediate tactical concerns. "Identification. Fleet Admiral Crix Prime's task force, sir. 12 dreadnoughts with full conquest complement. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. The implications hit Zex-9 like a physical blow. Admiral Crix Prime was known throughout the Empire for his efficiency and ruthlessness. If he arrived to find Zex-9's fleet engaged in extended negotiations with humans who were having barbecues, there would be immediate consequences for everyone involved, especially the humans." "Commander," Core 3 said urgently, "what are your orders? Should we prepare to receive the Admiral?" Zex-9 stared down at Earth, where thousands of families continued their reunions with the same joyful determination that had characterized their response from the beginning. In 6 hours, Admiral Crix Prime would arrive expecting to find a conquered world, or a world in the process of being conquered. Instead, he would find a species that had responded to invasion by inviting the invaders to dinner. The Admiral would not find this as charming as Zex-9 had begun to. "Open a channel to the planet," Zex-9 ordered. "All frequencies, maximum distribution." "Channel open, sir." "Attention, humans of Earth. This is Commander Zex-9 of the Vorthak Invasion Fleet. I am addressing your entire species with information of critical importance. On the surface below, activity at the reunion sites paused as humans stopped their food preparation and conversation to listen. In approximately 6 hours, additional Vorthak forces will arrive in your system. These forces are commanded by Fleet Admiral Krix Prime, who has a different approach to planetary conquest than my fleet. I cannot guarantee your safety if you maintain your current exposed positions when he arrives." Zex-9 paused, struggling with concepts that had no precedent in his military training. How do you warn an enemy about incoming friendly forces? How do you protect conquest targets from your own empire? I am advising immediate dispersal of your family gatherings and relocation to defensive positions. This is not a surrender demand or a tactical deception. This is a warning from someone who has come to understand that your species possesses qualities that deserve preservation. The transmission ended, leaving Zex-9's bridge in stunned silence. His crew stared at their commander, trying to process the fact that he had just warned their conquest targets about incoming Imperial reinforcements. "Sir," Cora 3 said carefully, "did you just advise the humans to take defensive positions against our own fleet?" "I did." That's treason, sir." Zex-9 nodded slowly. "Yes, Lieutenant. It is." The response from Earth came within minutes. Instead of panic or frantic defensive preparations, the planet-wide communication network lit up with something that defied every military projection Zex-9 had ever encountered. Family after family transmitted the same message. "Thank you for the warning. We're staying together." Emma Rodriguez appeared on screen one final time, now surrounded by what appeared to be her entire extended family. "We talked about it," she said with the same fearless directness that had characterized her previous communications. "Abuela says that family sticks together no matter what happens. If we're going to face whatever comes next, we want to face it together." Her grandmother appeared beside her, placing a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "We understand the danger," Rosa said with quiet dignity. "But running away and hiding isn't how we want our children to remember us. If this is our last day together, we want it to be a good one." Similar messages came from reunion sites across the planet. Families acknowledged the warning, expressed gratitude for Zex-9's concern, and unanimously chose to continue their gatherings rather than seek individual safety. Commander YLEX-7 reported, "They're not dispersing. Every major reunion site is maintaining its current configuration. They're choosing family unity over survival probability." Zex-9 found himself facing a decision that would define not only his career, but his understanding of what strength truly meant. In 6 hours, Admiral Krix Prime would arrive expecting standard conquest protocols. He would find humans who had responded to invasion with kindness, a commander who had warned conquest targets about Imperial reinforcements, and a crew that had begun to identify emotionally with their intended victims. "All stations," Zex-9 announced to his bridge crew, "prepare for Admiral Krix Prime's arrival. Full combat readiness, standard formation protocols." His officers moved to comply, but Zex-9 could see confusion in their movements. They were preparing to protect their conquest targets from their own empire, and everyone on the bridge understood the implications. "Sir," Cora 3 asked quietly, "what are we going to tell the Admiral?" Zex-9 looked down at Earth one final time, where families continued sharing meals and stories under the shadow of an approaching fleet that wouldn't be interested in pancakes or potato salad. Emma Rodriguez was somewhere down there, probably helping her grandmother prepare dinner for anyone who wanted to join them. "We're going to tell him the truth, Lieutenant. We're going to tell him that we encountered a species that taught us something about strength that isn't in any military manual. And then we're going to see if the Vorthak Empire is strong enough to learn something new." As Admiral Krix Prime's fleet approached, Zex-9 realized that the humans had accomplished something no species had managed in 47 previous invasions. They had transformed their would-be conquerors into their protectors, not through superior firepower or diplomatic cunning, but through the simple act of treating enemies as potential family. The invasion had indeed paused for a family reunion. Whether it would resume would depend on whether the Vorthak Empire was ready to discover that some forms of strength had nothing to do with the ability to destroy. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.